Tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou katoa. Hello and welcome to today's live Q&A for Audience Atlas Aotearoa focused on Asian New Zealand audiences and the market for Asian New Zealand arts. Daga ho,歡迎大家今日嚟參加呢個研討會. We're really sorry for the little delay this morning. We are beaming in from Wellington and Munich, and sometimes technology just goes a little bit astray, but we are with you now. Thank you for bearing with us, and we look forward to what's ahead. So before we start, I'll lead us in a karakia this morning. Me noi tātou. Po hihiri, po rarama, po o te whakaro, po o te tangata. Po o te aroha, te po e here nei i a tātou. Mauri ora ki a tātou. Haumi e, hui e, tae ki e. May clarity be yours, may understanding be yours, through reflection, through personal endeavour, through respect, the virtues which bind us as one. May we be filled with well-being, bound together, unified. Kia ora, daiga ho, daja hao, namaste, kamosta, annyeonghaseyo, konnichiwa, ayubowan, vanakum, jomripsyo, ciaobang. Greetings to you all and a very warm welcome to Creative New Zealand's 4th Audience Atlas Aotearoa live Q&A session. Ko Chelsea Wong toku ingoa, Ogil Wong Oisi. My name is Chelsea Wong. I'm a senior advisor in the policy and performance team at Creative New Zealand, and I will be your facilitator today as we explore how Asian New Zealand audiences engage in the arts and the market for Asian New Zealand arts in Aotearoa. I'm a first-generation New Zealand-born Chinese from Tamaki Makaurau, Auckland, of Hong Kong, Guangzhou and Chiujiao descent. I have long dark hair, dark-coloured eyes. Today I'm wearing pink, and I'm coming to you live from the Creative New Zealand offices in Wellington. Thank you for taking your time on this Tuesday morning to join us. And again, sorry for the delay at the start, where we will be sharing some insights from our most recent Audience Atlas Aotearoa research. What is Audience Atlas? This is a research study designed to help arts and cultural organisations, artists and arts practitioners understand the needs of audiences and explore the potential of the arts and culture market in Aotearoa. We've been collecting data for Audience Atlas with research consultancy Morris Hargreaves McIntyre every 3 years since 2011. The findings from today are from our 4th edition of this research completed in 2020. Earlier this year, we presented 3 other live Q&A sessions sharing insights from our 2020 research, including one focused on Māori audiences and the market for Ngātoi Māori, and one focused on Pacifica audiences and the market for Pacific arts. For the first time, we're really excited today to be presenting this Q&A focused on Asian audiences and the market for Asian arts in Aotearoa. It's my pleasure to introduce my co-host for today, Andrew McIntyre. Andrew is co-founder of research consultancy Morris Hargreaves McIntyre, who undertook the primary research. He's normally based in the UK, but he's joining us today from Munich, and he's made it. So kia ora, leiho, and good evening, Andrew. It's really great to have you with us.
Hi, Chelsea. It's really nice to be here. We got over the technical difficulties. That was me, by the way. And I'm really pleased to be joining you.
We're really pleased you can join us too, Andrew. So as I mentioned, Andrew is part of Morris Hargreaves McIntyre, also known as MHM. They are an award-winning strategic insight agency and a leading authority on audience motivations, behaviour and responses in the arts. Specialists in audience research, unpacking the makeup of audiences and understanding what makes audiences tick, MHM work with cultural organisations across the globe of all sizes. They have been thought leaders in this space for over 20 years and have partnered with Creative New Zealand to produce Audience Atlas research for over 10 years. So they have, together we have accumulated a lot of knowledge about Aotearoa audiences. MHM are no strangers to this part of the world and have a small team based in Tamaki Makaurau, Auckland. If you've joined our previous live sessions, you'll recognise Andrew, and you may also recognise some of the kōrero today, particularly around culture segments and our methodology. So thank you for coming back to join us. How today will work is that there are 3 parts to this Q&A. First up, Andrew will explain the research approach and introduce a psychographic tool called culture segments. We'll then learn more about Asian audiences in the second part. And to finish off, we'll look at the market for Asian New Zealand arts in Aotearoa. There will be a lot of information shared with you today throughout this session, and Andrew will help us unpack some of those findings. But there's plenty of opportunities for you to ask any questions as we go along too. If you have a question, simply pop it in the chat box to the right of your screen on both Facebook and YouTube. We have the Creative New Zealand whānau in the background who will help make sure your questions get to Andrew and myself, and may also be able to answer some of those questions too. Before we jump in, a big thanks to our New Zealand Sign Language interpreters from Platform Interpreting New Zealand who are joining us this morning. Ngā mihi nui. Thank you also, Dorjesai, to our partners at Auckland Live who are making the live stream component possible today. This live stream will be recorded and posted on our website after the event, so you can share with others or watch again. So let's get into it. Andrew, would you like to start us off today by introducing the research and telling us more about culture segments?
Absolutely. I think we should start, though, by having a little mention of COVID. I don't think you can present any study in this time period without mentioning COVID first. It's impacted all our organizations and all of us as individuals. And it's been very difficult for some organizations and practitioners. We're still here, I think, thanks to the efforts and support of governments that have backed culture, funders that have directed support to culture, and of course donors, not least the general public. And I think one thing has become really clear, which is that those organizations that have the deepest roots in community, that have the strongest relationships with their audiences, are the ones that have survived COVID the easiest. In fact, we know of some organizations who, when they were in difficulty financially, say during COVID, have appealed to their audiences and have not only had the response they were hoping for in terms of raising the kind of sums they needed to keep just going, but some organizations have had the biggest levels of donations they've ever had. And in fact, widened their donor base just because they tapped into that level of deep support that audiences have with them, the deep affinity. And the opposite is true, is that those organizations that have, let's call it a more transactional relationship with their audiences, where they just sell tickets and they don't really know the audiences, and the audiences are not part of their organization, and they don't really do much to embed themselves in community, have really struggled because they have no one to appeal to. If your relationship is with somebody only extends to buyer and seller, why would the buyer want to then donate money to you? So it's become really crucial, I think, for organizations that want to become more resilient to use this lesson from COVID as a really interesting approach to the future, which is if you can deepen your engagement with audience and you can deepen your roots into community, then you're far more likely to succeed. And that's useful for us this morning because all of the data that we're going to share with you is about how to understand audiences in a much more, nuanced and sophisticated way, and to give you some tools that will help you to deepen your connections. Now, I know a lot of people on the call will already have very strong community and audience connections, but I think this is the kind of useful information that can help all organizations to go even deeper. So that's my kind of the first thing I'm going to start with. Let's tell you a little bit about this study. So as Chelsea said, it's the 4th edition. And we ask a representative sample of the New Zealand population about their engagement with arts, culture, and heritage. So this is the should be. Okay, here we go. This is the map of the world of lots of places that have done similar studies, and the little percentages you can see are the percentages of the population in each of those countries that are active in the arts and culture market. And what you can see from this is that at 96%, New Zealand is by far the highest culturally active country that we've sampled, and we've sampled all over the world. This isn't all of the ones we've done. We've done, I think, over 20 countries now. So the New Zealand population is more culturally active than anywhere else we've sampled. 96% of the adult population report being in the market for arts, culture, and heritage. That's 3.94 million individuals, so best part of 4 million. So that's the first thing to say, is that compared to the size of your population, the market for arts and culture is huge. This is not a minority specialist niche thing. This is a mass market. Yeah, this is actually, dare I say this out loud? This is bigger than the market for rugby. There, I've said it. So, but it's true. So rugby would love it if it had this size of market. And of that 3.94 million, 577,000 of them identify as Asian. And in terms of the questions we asked there, we asked people to match themselves to the census, and 8 Asian groups were named. So we asked people to identify as Chinese, Indian, Filipino, Korean, Japanese, Sri Lankan, Cambodian, Vietnamese, as well as a more general other Asian ethnic option. And so that got us to 577,000 people in the population identify as that. 24% of those were born in New Zealand, like Chelsea, and 76% were born overseas. We should say that this study overall was of 6,743 people. So it's a huge study. If you think about the size of the samples they do to predict the, your general election, this is many, many times greater than that. And not only is this sample right across the country, so it's proportionally representative by geography. We've sampled people from every region, but it's also representative in terms of the right proportions of people by age, by gender, by educational attainment, which is the best proxy we have for not only affluence, but also kind of social grade and ethnicity. And just to make sure that we didn't just include people of different ethnicities, that we could actually dig deep and delve down into them, we had what we call a boosted sample, which is we oversampled. We sampled extra people for Maori, for Pacific peoples, and for Asian respondents. So we have more people than we needed in order that we could drill down and share this kind of data with you this morning for deeper insights. So what's interesting about Audience Atlas is that it isn't one of those surveys that looks in the rearview mirror and just reports on what people have already done, who went to this and who did that. We do that, we ask that, but we also ask, did you used to do this? Have you ever done this in the past? A lot of these surveys do, have you done this in 12 months? We ask, have you ever done it in your life? And so we can find out the people who used to do engagement with certain arts and culture and have stopped doing it. But we also ask, and this is critical, we ask, might you be interested in doing this art form or this genre in the future? So we're able not only to profile the existing current market, we can profile the lapsed market, the people we used to have but we've lost, and we can profile the potential future market. So this study and the data I'm going to share with you is actually focused very much on future opportunities. And whether you're a practitioner or you're working in a cultural organization, what I want you to take from this morning's session is any information or insight or data that helps you to better understand, to better plan for future engagement with these audiences. This is about looking forwards, not backwards. And what's interesting is that we look at 12 core art forms. And in the previous studies, we had a list of 11, and they were Maori arts, Pacific arts, Asian arts, theatre, dance, music, literature, museums, visual arts, craft and object art, and film. And what we've added this time, which was missing, and we're really glad we've added it, is festivals. And festivals is going to feature quite strongly in some of the data we're going to share with you later. So adding festivals has been a huge addition to this study, and in particular for Asian arts, it's really important. But it does more than just comprehensively cover art forms. It does two different things. It profiles and explores the market demographically, so age and gender and where people live and so on. But it also does it psychographically. And what that means, psychographics are about what people believe and how they think, rather than just who they are and where they are. So psychographics is a way to understand the process by which people engage with us. So we're going to do that through a system that Chelsea mentioned earlier called culture segments. And culture segments is interesting because it doesn't just tell us who people are or what they do, it actually tells us why they do it. And that's the critical bit of insight here. Not just why they do it, but why sometimes they don't do it, or maybe even more usefully, why they might do it. So if you want to target people who you don't currently have, culture segments is a way of designing your offer and communicating that actually taps into why people might actually respond to you. So this is culture segments. You'll see at the top of the screen, there's a URL. It's mhminsight.com/segment me. If you haven't already done this, even if you have, and I think you should have a go at this. This takes about a minute and a half to do. And I think you should all be able to do this multitasking whilst I'm talking. So if you've got a phone or you've got anything, or even just while you're doing this, if you go to this address, you'll be able to take a little test that honestly takes a minute, and it will tell you, it will reveal which culture segment you're in. And that will give you a little, I think it will make more sense of what I'm about to share with you. So if you want to have a go at that now, this will all will be revealed. So culture segments is based on people's deep-seated values and beliefs. If you like, it's based on what needs people hope to meet by engaging with us. So if they decide to come to a music event or a theatre event or a visual art event, what do they think that they're going to get out of it? What are they hoping to get from culture? And what we find with culture segments is different culture segments approach that in a different way. And understanding how people approach the decision to engage with you is critical. There are 8 segments. It's not a horoscope. We're not saying there are 8 types of people in the world. There are more than 8 types of people on the call. And not everyone in each of these segments is exactly the same as their fellow people in the segment, but they are similar enough in their responses to make it worthwhile grouping them together in one segment. And they're different enough to the other segments to justify them being separate rather than merged together. That makes sense. So there are 8 groupings, 8 clusters of people whose responses are kind of similar to each other, but different to the other 7. So let's kick off and tell you about them. So first up is a group called Essence. That's 7% of the Asian market in New Zealand. We've said that they're in pursuit of self-actualization. These people are culture vultures. They are avid attenders. They're really super active. Because of that, they're very knowledgeable. They're very confident. They're very discerning. So they sound like the ideal arts and culture attender, don't they? They want to come to lots of things and they know lots. They're also fiercely independently minded, and they like to make up their own minds. I had a thing recently with a group of these where somebody said, when I see a bad review, it makes me more likely to go because I'm not having someone else telling me what I should like. I'll be the judge of whether I like it or not. So that I think they also might enjoy liking things that no one else likes and maybe not liking things that everyone else likes if it's very popular. So it's a way of practicing their independence. In this group, I should also say that culture and arts to them, it's not what they do, it's who they are. It's like oxygen to them. So they can't survive without it. They can't imagine life without it. And I would say that many artists and curators and practitioners of all disciplines are in this group. It's not unusual to find the vast majority of creatives being in this group. It's interesting if I think about marketing to them, because they think marketing is for other people. They think, I know all of this stuff already. I don't need to read the marketing. So they don't. So you have to give them what looks more like information. And it's better if it comes from the artist or from the creative culture, the artistic director or whoever, than from marketing. They don't want to speak to marketing. During COVID, when people couldn't attend as much, they consumed more arts and culture online than any other segment. And that's because it's like oxygen to them. They can't do without it. But when we asked all of the segments whether they enjoyed the online stuff and what they thought of it, they rated it really poorly because it wasn't as good as the real thing. It was like, I suppose if I go with my oxygen analogy, it's like if the plane is crashing and the oxygen masks drop down, you'll take the oxygen mask, but it's not like breathing real air. So they took it because it was the only thing available, but it's not a patch on attending the real thing. So who's next? Next up are Expression. So Expression are people. They're community-minded and they're communally minded. They are empathetic, they're inclusive, they're egalitarian. They think that arts is for everyone. They love arts organizations that reach out to the community, that try to include people. And we've seen things where Expression who don't have children themselves think it's wonderful that arts organizations are doing things for children. It's that kind of altruism, that kind of inclusive empathy that marks them out. They're also very likely to bring other people with them. They're the people that say, oh, there's something really good on. Who wants to go? I'll get the tickets. So interestingly, if you are a venue and if you look at all of the sales you've made where the group size is greater than 2, it's 3 or more people coming, I'm going to say that most of those will be Expression because they're the people that bring other people with them. They want to be part of something bigger than themselves. They want to belong. They want to give something back. It's interesting when I talk about marketing, they use marketing, but they don't want to be marketed to. They kind of want to be on your team. They want to be on the inside. They want to be your friends. When they friend you on Facebook, they really want to be your friend. They want you to chat to them. They don't want you to market to them. We did a thing recently where we asked all the segments, if we sent you a poster for a forthcoming event, would you put it up in your local area? And something like 74% of expressions said, yes, we put up your poster for you. They just want to help. They want to be in your team. And I should say that's significantly higher, like in some cases more than double any of the other segments. In fact, we got several of them spontaneously contacted us and said, don't waste your money on printing all those posters and the postage. Just send us the PDF and we'll print it for you on our own printer. And then we'll put it up in our local area. So these people really want, you could almost deputize them as your kind of para-marketing team, and they'll go and tell everyone for you. In COVID, they found it hard because they kind of were isolated. They loved to be connected. They tried their best to stay in touch. But what they found with online content was it was dry and a bit kind of soulless and a bit alienating because there was no audience to share it with. What they liked was anything that was live, a live guided tour or a live interactive discussion, or a Q&A. So they liked anything in COVID where it felt like they were part of something and there were other people sharing it with them. They love the shared experience. They like the buzz of that. Next up are stimulation. I should admit that an interest here, I'm in stimulation. It's obviously the best segment. It's all about big ideas. We love it when you do something we're not expecting, or you collide art and history and politics with music and this and it's kind of crazy, or you go cross art form, or you mix things up in a way that we weren't expecting. And we like it if it's unusual, if it's an unusual venue or starts at an unusual time. I suppose we want fireworks at midnight on the roof, and we want to be on the invite list. So we want to be the first to know. We're seeking out novelty, things that are unusual, and we do it quite socially. We take friends with us, So, the stimulation person will be persuading all of their friends to come to this really weird, kind of multi-art form, strange thing with fire eating and puppets and, whatever. And their friends will say, it's not going to be like that Peruvian thing you took us to, is it? And they'll go, no, this one's going to be brilliant. And they have no idea. And when they get there, it'll either be brilliant and everyone will think it's really worth coming to, or it might not be, but they've all got a beer in their hand and it's fine. And the friends still keep coming because every third or fourth one blows their mind. So it's kind of risk-taking, seeking the new thing. During COVID, they had a wild time because they discovered a smorgasbord of totally new content from all kinds of new providers, which is kind of what they live for. They just want new stuff. They're quite fickle. You have to keep surprising them and keep telling them there's something really cool or really interesting or really different or really new. And if you've got that content, then they'll come. I should also say, I said that Expression would put up posters for you. They'll do it slowly and eventually they will tell everyone. But Stimulation want to get in at the beginning. They want to be the first to know. And they literally will tell everyone. They will post it online. Nothing ever went viral. Nothing ever went viral without Stimulation supporting it, because they're the people that scour the internet for the latest, coolest new thing, put it up on the internet and share it with everyone, and then all the other stimulation people share it, and then it starts to trend, and then maybe the wider market sees it. But that's how you get things viral. You get Stimulation to do it for you. Okay, now we get affirmation. Now, affirmation at 22%. So you'll see 25% expression, 11% stimulation, 22% affirmation. Affirmation are interesting because they are self-consciously deliberately decided that they want to do more arts and cultures. Arts and culture will make my life better. So if I go to an exhibition, or even if I read a book or see a film or go to a gig or whatever, it's time well spent. It's worthwhile. And I will become more interesting or a better person because of it. And so it's all about expanding your repertoire of culture. They are constantly looking for new things to do, but they surprisingly don't do very many of them. And the reason is they're looking for an incredibly high level of guarantee. They're looking for high levels of recommendation. They don't want to take risks. So it's this really unusual combination of a real hunger to expand their repertoire and try new things, but without taking risks. And so the only way that happens is if we're able to give people enough guarantees or enough reassurance that it's okay to come and try things. I've got to be careful here because my wife's in the same room. But we don't have bad restaurant meals because my wife has read every single review. So, and the same is true of arts. You have to read all the reviews to see whether it's any good. So these people are on TripAdvisor, they're on all kinds of internet sites looking for, if a friend recommends it, that's perfect. So we have to do a better job of trying to reassure these people. In COVID, they were able to try lots of things from the safety of their sofa without risking time or money or effort. You could just try things. And so they were able to find things that they might like to try in real life. The lesson for us there is, are we putting enough video? Are we putting enough stuff online to give you enough of a taster of what our event's going to be like to convince you that you should buy a ticket? Because that's what these people need. They almost need a preview of it in order to go, yeah, it does look good. We can buy that ticket now. Next up are enrichment. These are quite traditional. So these age groups, these segments are not demographic. You'll find every age group in every segment. You'll find families in every segment, for example. Different proportions maybe, but everyone is in all of them. I will say that this one tracks a little bit older. It's quite nostalgic. It's quite traditional. People in this group tend to really value things from the past. They look at the current present through the lens of the past. They like things that are classic or famous or have stood the test of time or award-winning or acclaimed. So they're not going to go and try the new stuff. They'll let all the other segments go and try the new stuff. And if it's any good, it'll stand the test of time. It'll still be around. So they'll wait till everyone else has road tested it, and then the good stuff will rise to the top, and then they'll go and see it. So they're looking for super guarantees. It has to already have achieved something. I should say that in COVID, what was interesting about that group is that they didn't really surf around looking at all the content. There were a few things, weren't there, like live performances by orchestras or by theatre shows and things like that. They loved those kinds of things, but they almost used the internet as a kind of extra TV channel where there was a really good play on, or there was a really good concert performance that you could tune into on some obscure website and watch it. And so when they couldn't go in person, that's what they did. But it was quite narrow. Next up are perspective, only 5%. These people are slightly geeky, slightly nerdy. They are really interested in something. And that could be a particular kind of art, or it could be a particular kind of music. They might be an absolute expert on some quite narrow genre of music. Or they might be fascinated by, I don't know, American motorcycles, 1952 to 68, or I don't know, astronomy, something they're really fascinated with. You have to find the thing. If you've got a thing, you can find, it's almost like finding a special interest group on the web, a group that's dedicated to the thing that you've got. So if you think that people who are particularly interested in something would like your thing, you've got to go out and find them. But I'll tell you that they're not looking. And in COVID, all they did was just dive deeper into their interest, their own specialist interest. The second last one is release. 15% of the markets. They're quite big. They're the third biggest group in the Asian audience. These people are time poor. These people are stressed. They would love to do more culture, but they don't think they've got the time to do it. When am I ever going to get the time to do this? So it is like, and so if you're only going to see one thing, what should it be? And so it ends up being the thing that's very obvious. It's on the radar of everyone, or it's the thing that's being most recommended at the time. So they tend to avoid risks because they don't want to take, waste the only occasion that they're going to go out. So these people have got very little time and they want to use it well, if that makes sense. And finally, the last 6% are entertainment, and they're really not bothered about it being artistic or cultural or heritage. They just want to have fun. And so whatever it is your event is competing with bowling or going to the cinema or going for a swim or anything else that you could do in your leisure time. They don't have art as a special category. It's just stuff. And so, going to the movies. So, and some of your events will have that level of fun appeal. They don't want to have to try too hard. They don't want to have to read lots. They don't want to have to kind of put a lot of effort in order to get the reward. They just want instant gratification. So if you've got fun things, and we mentioned festivals before, festivals can do this, but if you've got fun things, community things, whatever, these people will come. But they're not people you should. There's only 6% of them. They're not really that worth doing. So, and I'll tell you what they did in COVID. They didn't engage with any of our longer material online. What they did was they watched the 30-second clip from some museum that was trending on TikTok. Somebody dancing. I don't know. They didn't really engage with the content. So Chelsea, if I can just pause there, because that's the culture segments defined. We've talked about the size of the Asian audience, 577,000, the percentages that are in there. Obviously, some of those are more worth targeting than others, but I'll just pause there and see what you think.
Thanks so much, Andrew. That's a lot of information that's all really, really fascinating and really starts to get us into this world of understanding our audiences better. So I can see a few people in our audience this morning have already taken the test for culture segments. We have a few expression and stimulation segments in the room with us. As Andrew said, if you haven't already, you can find out which segment you are by heading along to mhminsight.com/segment-me. Andrew is a stimulation segment, I believe, and I'm in the affirmation category. So there you go. I'm really interested to learn more about this massive market for arts and culture, Andrew, that you mentioned. So 96% of our population, as you say, dare we say it, bigger than the market for rugby, and 577,000, which is a really sizable proportion of that, identify as Asian. So we have a really strong and growing Asian population in New Zealand. It's becoming a really important community, and it has been for a long time. So tell us more about the key findings about our Asian audiences. What culture segments are they? What are they interested in?
Okay, well, I've got some slides I can share with you for that. It's really interesting because on one level, they are fully represented in the audience. There's 14% of the culture market and 14% of the population. So Asian audiences are as likely as anyone else to be in the market. But the segments they're in are somewhat different. This is where it gets interesting. So apologies for putting a table on the screen. It's not my ideal thing to do, but let me see if I can share this with you. So in the first column of numbers, there are the segments down the left that we've just gone through, and a little reminder of who they are. In the first column, it's called culture market. That is the proportion of each of these in the New Zealand population. In the second column, and the purple one that's marked Asian audiences average, that the numbers in there are the proportions of these segments in the Asian population. And you'll see they're quite different. So the blue, the ones marked blue are significantly lower. So, there are fewer entertainments at the bottom. There are fewer perspective at the bottom. They're only 5%, 9% in the wider population. And right at the top there's slightly fewer essence. It's only 7% rather than 10%. But I'd really like to concentrate on the pink ones, the ones marked red that are higher. So could we start with release, which is the lowest one there? The 15% of the Asian audience are release. Only 12% of the wider New Zealand market is. Release, if you remember, are time poor. And what we think is happening here is that, and we see this typically when we delve into who's in release. In release, you tend to have people that have more work commitments. So they're often either working long hours in one job, or quite often have many jobs, so 2 or more jobs. So they're holding down lots of different bits of employment, or they are working very long hours with lots of overtime and so on in a single job. Also, we find people that have more family commitments, whether that's as carers or just other family commitments that they have to do. They're looking after other generations of family. And so we think that both of those things are more true or more prevalent in the Asian audience in New Zealand than in the wider audience. We think there is, there are more hours being worked, and we also think there are more family commitments that people have. And that's a typical pattern that we've seen in other studies. And that will mean that more people will therefore be time poor and therefore identify in this release category. And that will be a dampener on their cultural participation because they don't have a lot of time for it. So they're only going to come to certain things. And so those things have to be very prominent or very kind of obvious. And we keep trailing the idea of festival, but festival is one of those. If we move up one to affirmation, you'll see that it's 18 in the wider population, but 22 in the Asian audience, which is significantly higher. And what's also interesting is if you move across to those in the Asian audience, remember 3/4 were born overseas, it actually goes up to 24%. So what's really interesting is when we have done these studies in countries in Asia, affirmation is the highest, always the biggest segment, more so than anywhere else in the world. And if you remember, affirmation are wanting to do more culture. They're trying on different cultural activities for size. They're like, try a bit of this, try a bit of this, just find out what they like. And they're growing their cultural repertoire. But they're doing it in a very cautious way. And so what we think's happening here is we think that as people get more leisure time and as they have greater disposable income and as they have the opportunity to try more cultural activity, then the drive to be in affirmation is that they're wanting to try more culture, spend their disposable leisure income and their disposable leisure time on arts and cultural activity that they may not have tried before, and those that they like, they'll go back to. And so we think that this, alongside the growth of the Asian population in New Zealand, we think that within that population, there is a growth of arts and cultural attendance, driven by the fact that almost 1/4 of them are in this affirmation segment that is committed to trying new things and doing more culture. And they're interested in the idea that culture will make their lives better. And so this is an enormous opportunity. If you remember that we had 577,000 people, 22% of that is a lot of people. So these are seriously committed audiences, but they need a lot of handholding and help. So if we move up finally to the expression line, you'll see that 20% of the wider population are expression. These are the people, the community people, the communal people that want to be involved and support you. They're hardwired to support culture. It's 25% in the Asian audience, which is higher. That goes up to 28% of those born in New Zealand. And we were saying before that expression is all about community. And we think the explanation for this is that not everyone, but the Asian communities are more tight-knit, more connected than the wider population. There are more familial connections and more community connections. And that's very true of the people who were born in New Zealand, and that's why it's 28%. So we have a huge proportion of people in the quarter who are deeply connected to community, and that is one route to engage them. If your organization is engaged in community, if your event is plugging into community or is happening in the community, then this is a natural audience for that. But what's also interesting is when your events are maybe not in like community-based events, if they're, say, in, let's call them traditional arts venues, expression are probably going to try and bring people that they know in their wider community to your event. And so that's why the group sizes may not always, but will tend to be larger. And so we think that not only do expression tend to have larger group sizes, but we think that Asian expression will have even larger group sizes. So this is two things working together. So we'll get onto this in a minute, but if you want this audience, you need to connect to community, and/or you need to make it easy for expression people to bring their community with them. And we don't always do a very good job of that. At the risk of us being a spoiler, let me say how. Often, the party size for a traditional event, for a ticketed event, would be 2 people. So we sell single tickets here, by 2 people. We often have something like a group rate. You can get a discount, or there's a special ticket offer for a group, but we often set the group size at something like 10, because we presume a group size is going to be an organization like a youth club or a women's institute or something. What we find in expression, but we also find in the Asian audience, and particularly in the Asian expression audience, is that their group size might be 4 or 7. And so they're falling between this, vanilla couple, 2 people got together, and a big organized group come in a minibus. What we've got is a kind of a smaller group, but it's still a group. But somebody is organizing that group. They might be coming in more than one car. They might be coming on public transport. We as venues don't actually do a very good job of encouraging, supporting, servicing medium-sized groups that are less than 10. The groups that don't have a group leader who's paid, who's just volunteering to bring friends and family. So what could we do if you think about the ticketing process, if you think about the price, if you think about all of the information and the arrangements, what could we do that would better support expression groups? It's a quarter of the audience. If you get that right, that could be significant. Okay. So let's look at why people are coming. So what's interesting here is these are the drivers from a big bucket list we gave them of why people come. So right at the top here, we've got intellectual. So people say that expanding their knowledge is critical. That's one of the real reasons to go to arts and culture, and collecting new experiences. These two are the ultimate reasons for affirmation. Remember, we talked about the affirmation group who are trying new things, want to try new things. So collecting new experiences and finding out new knowledge. It's a kind of, it's quite a self-improvement kind of driver. I'll be a better person after I've been to these things and I have more knowledge and I've got new experiences than I am before I went. And then there's this big, strong social thing, which is spending time with friends and family. And we were talking about bringing groups and visiting a major attraction. And these are classic, they're classic expression things. we want to spend quality time together with the people you love. But it's also a kind of release thing. It's like, if we only do one thing, let's do a big thing. So it's interesting that the segments that are popping for the Asian audience are also then reflected in these primary drivers. If we then look at the ones that they're less likely to say, they're not so interested in developing their children's interests, or passing the time, or seeing buildings, or this idea of escapism. It's more practical than that. It's like, we want to go to interesting things where we learn stuff, and we want to go with people we love. We want to go to a big place that is, or a big attraction that's got a good reputation, that we know it's going to be good, it's guaranteed, with the people we love, and we're going to learn something when we get there. And when we leave, we'll be enhanced somehow. We'll have improved ourselves. So this is the driver for why those people are coming. Okay, so if we look at that, we give people this long list, and we ask them to pick as many things from this list as they like. And you'll see in here, social comes out top. There are more people picking social reasons to go than anything else, closely followed by intellectual, which is kind of learning things. Emotional, which is all about feelings and empathy and whatever, comes quite along down. Spiritual, which is kind of about reflection or escape, comes lower down as well. But if we ask people a slightly different question, which is, what's the main motivation? If you could only pick one reason to go to arts and culture, what would it be? We get this. I think you're going to need to drop me off the screen to see the full bar. But what this graph shows is that actually it's now intellectual that's larger. And you'll see the culture market average below. In the culture market average, it's 42 social, 33 intellectual. In the Asian audience, it's 37 social, 39 intellectual. So this is some serious kind of, I want to learn something. I want to understand the world, and I want to have these experiences where I grow. So this is really interesting. It just backs up what we're saying on the previous slide, which was you need to explain to people what it is they're going to experience and what it is they're going to learn and why that would be interesting. If you forget to do that in information and marketing, then people will be less likely to come. Okay, so this is interesting. A lot of surveys say, oh, what are the barriers to attendance? And what they do is they give you a big laundry list of all the possible reasons why you might not have been to cultural events, and people tick them. And really, it's kind of like a list of excuses. It's like, it's like somebody asking you, why haven't you been to the gym? Was it you were too tired? You were, and people just say, oh yeah, that one, I didn't have time. And so we don't do that. We ask a much, much smarter question. So the question we ask is, in the past 12 months, can you actually recall a specific event or occasion, cultural arts event, that you wanted to go to, but something actually prevented you from doing so? So it's got to be a real example. I really wanted to go to that, but I couldn't go to it because of this. So it's not just a generic, oh yeah, it's very expensive, or it's about, I don't have time. It's about people reporting actually being prevented from going. And what we find here is that 32% of the Asian audience can report that something stopped. They can think of an event where something stopped them from going. It's slightly lower than the wider audience, which is 36%, but it's still a lot of people. 32% could actually say, yeah, I would have gone, but this stopped me. And what that actually relates to is 187,000 people wanted to go to an event that they didn't end up going to. And so understanding why they didn't go is quite useful to us. And the answer, and I should say this is the same as the top answer for the wider New Zealand population, but it's worth saying, is price. So 36% cite price as the number one reason. That's the same as the wider population. But we have a problem with price, which is that if these people are telling us that they would have come, but not at that price, it means that we haven't tuned our prices in to the demand. Now, if you're selling out at the higher price, maybe you don't care. But I'm going to suggest that your audience will be less diverse if you miss out on this audience, but also it means that there are definitely people being excluded from your audience if you don't have the right price point. Now, it doesn't mean that all the prices need to be cheaper. It could be that you have different prices for different tickets, different amounts of tickets that are available through different channels. And maybe you've got tickets that can be bought through the community that are cheaper than other tickets and so on. But there is an issue about price that needs to be tackled. Second is difficulties with travel, transport, and parking. And that is significantly higher than the wider population. And we think this is likely down to group size, because it may be that people are worrying about, well, how do we get everyone there? Maybe we're going in more than one vehicle. Maybe some people are coming on the bus. Where will we meet? How does this work? And also we think it's because there are more affirmation in the Asian market, and affirmation need to know everything. Where does the bus stop? Can you get something to eat? How does it all work? Can you park? So there's a lot of fear or a lot of reasons that might stop them from booking because they don't know all the details. And we assume often that our current audience know all of that, so we don't really say much. But this audience needs more explanation, needs more detail. We often don't give that. Another example would be something like, if people are driving, which some people will, I know we should be encouraging green transport, can we do a deal with the bus company to get free travel or discounted travel or whatever? Can we do some kind of public transport offer with our ticket to make it easy? But let's say people are driving, can you sell them a reserved guaranteed car parking space at the point of sale with your ticket? So can I buy 4 tickets for this event and the car parking space, please? And if people have got a car parking space with their name on it, maybe they're not so worried about travel and transport and parking, because I'm now reassured that it's going to be okay. Well, whereas we could just turn up and there's no car parking spaces, and what will happen, and where will we be? So there are some really practical things here. Now, can I take you all the way down to the bottom? The special access needs, 8% of the Asian audience said that special access needs prevented them going. Only 4% of the wider audience said that. I should also say that there are 9% of the Asian audience identify as disabled, which I think amounts to something like 52,000 people. And so this is clearly an issue. And it may be it may not be that they have more special access needs. It may again be that we're not giving sufficiently obvious information about what provision there is for special access needs. And so people, if they don't immediately see that it's going to be okay, and that there is level access, or there is, hearing loops, or there is whatever it is, or signed performances, we should say, that if that information isn't obviously available, maybe people give up easily, or give up before they find it because it isn't obvious enough. And so remember that affirmation need to be absolutely guaranteed that it's all going to be okay before they go. So these are some real things to think about. Are we, just by not paying enough attention to these things, unwittingly excluding people from our audience? Right, so let's look at online behavior. 18% of Asian audiences have engaged online, and that's very similar to the wider population. But what's interesting is 40% say that they potentially would be interested in engaging with the arts online, and that compares to only 30% for the wider population. So this is a really big opportunity. if we take that one step further, what we then find is that the people who've actually done it, donated money to access arts and culture online in the past 12 months. It's 13% of the Asian audience have actually done it. That, sorry, I should say of that 18%, it splits down. Almost a third of the people who have paid for online content would not do so again. Now, that could just be the post-COVID effect. We don't need to, because we can go in real life. But I think that it also suggests that the content that we're offering online is not meeting people's needs. It's not compelling. We should say that for the wider audience, it's only 2% that wouldn't go. It's 8% who wouldn't do it again in the Asian audience. So there's more interest and there's many people doing it, but the content isn't as sticky. And so maybe it's to do with the kind of content that's available or the range of content that's available. It's just not doing it for the Asian audience. So let's look at the art forms in which Asian audiences are active. These are the top 5. So there's festivals. It's finally appeared. Been promising it for a while, haven't I? 80% are active. So these are the 5 art forms in which Asian audiences are more active than the wider population. So festivals at 80% is 12% higher than the average for New Zealand. So this is a real affinity with festivals. Visual arts, 9% more likely to go to visual arts, but obviously Asian arts, 27% more likely. You might assume that that's likely, but they're 7% more likely to go to dance and 9% more likely to go to literature events. So this is really interesting. This is not just an audience that's dabbling. This is an audience that's actually more active than the wider population in some art forms. And these are the 5 art forms that it is. If we then look at the top art forms that Asian audiences have actually engaged with, not surprisingly, 92% film is top. I should say that that's 92% of the wider audience as well. Film's always top. People like the movies. But festivals, there it is again at 80%. That's really high. Visual arts, which we mentioned already, and Asian arts at the bottom. But museums now make the top 5 that Asian audiences are attending. So this is kind of interesting if we're looking at what the gateways are, and festivals are an obvious gateway into Asian arts. So let me dig into that just a little bit more deeply. I'm going to put up my most complicated slide to date, which is this one. Do apologize. It's a little bar chart. It's like a graphic equalizer. The bars that are above the line are overperforming the market. The bars that are below the line are underperforming the market. When I say the market, I mean the average for the whole of New Zealand. So what we're actually finding here is that essence and expression and stimulation are over-indexing, a little bit of affirmation, are over-indexing, are more likely to go to festivals than the other art forms. Enrichment are not coming, perspective and entertainment are not coming, release are kind of on the average. If you look at the age band in the next one, the 25 to 34s are more likely to go than anywhere else. The over 55s are also less likely to attend. I should say this is for within the Asian market. Yeah, this is of the Asian market. Children in households, about average, but look at disability. Those that are differently abled are 8 percentage points more likely to attend festivals than the wider population. And then let's look at when you arrived in New Zealand. So the more recently arrived you are in New Zealand, the more likely you are to attend festivals. So that's why we think that festivals are a real gateway for these audiences. Certain kinds of segments, younger audiences, those with disabilities, and those more recently arrived. And so what we're finding here is by digging down into the data, we can really start to understand. We can do this for every single art form. We should say, we're sharing lots of data with you this morning, but there is a big fat report with lots more in that you can download for free from Creative New Zealand that has this for every art form. So whatever your art form is, if we're not showing you or you don't do festivals, you can get this for everything. And this should be super useful to you. And then let's look at visual arts. A slightly different pattern here. This time, look at what we've got. We've got a lot of expression coming to visual arts. That's the highest one. Essence are there again. Stimulation are there again. Young people are there again. Disability now goes to 14 percentage points higher than the average. Now, what's interesting to remember, we were saying about how confident are people that their disability special needs will be met. And they're looking for reassurance on that. One of the things that we know about visual arts is that people have a perception of places, art galleries, other places where libraries, where other places where visual arts are displayed, that they will be less crowded, that they'll be in public buildings, so there's probably level access. They'll be well lit. They won't be too noisy. So there's all depending on your different range of disability needs, there's a perception that places that display visual art are more likely to have the kinds of provision or the kind of environment that is going to work well if you have a disability or someone in your party has a disability, than if you say go to a music gig in a place with steps and in the dark, there's lots of people moving around, you might have a poor sight line, so not surprisingly, visual arts are here, but this is really important stuff. There's 52,000 people who identify as Asian with a disability in the culture market, and they are clearly keen to engage with art, and we have to make sure that we are doing everything we can. Now, we could go back to digital and say that digital is also super important for that group. And one of the biggest fears that this group has is that the provision that was provided during lockdowns and during COVID online is now going to fade away and melt away and disappear, and that suddenly all of this access that they had to taking part is going to go away as well. And so the biggest single thing we need to remember with digital is this has been a new lease of life and a lifeline for disabled audiences, and we should do our best to hold on and hang on to them. So that's all I'm going to show you, Chelsea, about there's more obviously in the report, but I think we've covered quite a lot.
We have indeed. Thanks very much, Andrew, for all those insights. So many rich insights about our Asian audiences, what motivates them, what interests them, what holds them back. So as you said, intellectual and social drivers are really important for our Asian audiences. We love growing knowledge and we love staying connected. So great things to remember if we're marketing or building strategies around these audiences. If you would like more detail, you can dive into the full report, which is available on our website for more information. And thanks to everyone so far who's listening at home this morning for all your questions. Keep them coming in. If we can't answer them immediately, we'll definitely follow up with you, but we're doing our best at the moment to answer your questions via the chat. In the interests of time, we're going to keep going to the next topic because I'm sure there's still so much more to learn, Andrew. So tell us more about this market for Asian arts and culture. You mentioned there's an affinity for festivals and a strong interest for visual arts from our Asian community, but what about the market in general? And is there enough supply to meet the demand?
Well, this is where it gets really interesting because we keep flagging up this 577,000 who identify as Asian. But what about the market for Asian arts? Well, we remember, don't you, that there were 3.94 million New Zealanders in the market. And the good news is that 3.6 million of them are open to Asian arts. That's 90% of the entire market for arts and culture in New Zealand, which, if you remember, was 96% of the whole population. 90% of them are potentially interested in Asian arts. And not only that, that may seem like a big figure, but half of them, or more than half of them, 1.9 million of the culture market, 49% of the culture market have engaged in the past 3 years. So these are people who have recently, or very recently, engaged in Asian arts. So that's a huge number of people. So you've got the 577 million who identify as Asian, but overall there are 1.9 million people who say that they've recently engaged with Asian arts. So this is absolutely an enormous market. And you know, if you think about some of the other art form genres in New Zealand, whether it's opera or whatever it is, this makes Asian arts an enormous art form. It makes it one of the most popular art forms in New Zealand by some distance. I think that might be invisible before we did this study. I mean, lots of pockets of people doing things all over the place. You see the festivals, but lots of people doing it. 1.9 million. There are a further 742,000 that say, I have been to Asian arts, but not in the last 3 years. And you've got to remember that, you know, that's, you know, not that long ago. They could have gone 4 years ago, 5 years. They might have gone 10 years ago. But this is another 750,000 New Zealanders who know what we're talking about and have done something, but just haven't done it that recently. So we've had these people, but they've slipped through our fingers. We don't have them anymore. We potentially could have them back, but we're not currently engaging them. And then beyond that, there's a further 890,000, we're going to get over another million here, who say, I haven't done Asian arts, but I'd be open to trying it. That sounds good. I just haven't had the opportunity or the circumstance, or I haven't actually got round to doing it yet. Now, I'm not saying that all those 890,000 are heading out next weekend to try it, but they're not saying no to it. It's just that we haven't managed to get them to say yes to it. And that could be because it isn't visible enough, there isn't enough provision, or it could just be that we're not persuading them enough. But this is an absolutely enormous market. This is huge. If we were looking at this for any other art form, you'd be really, really happy with these figures. So this makes Asian arts one of New Zealand's biggest current art forms, but it also makes it one of its biggest potential art forms. And that's absolutely crucial. So if we look at who's in the market, who are all of these people, you know, so let's first of all look at this 1.9 million. Who are these people who've recently engaged with Asian arts? Well, it's younger than the average. So 41% of this market is under 35. Whereas in the wider population, that's 34% are under 35. So it's much more younger people. It's also much more diverse. So 66% identify as New Zealand European. That's 76% of the wider market. 12% identify as Pacifica versus 8% in the wider market, and 23% identify as Asian, not surprisingly, other than the 15% in the wider market. So 36% have children, slightly up from 33% in the wider market. 13% have a lived experience of disability, the same as the wider market. So this is a market that's younger and more diverse. If we look at the lapsed market, what we find is it's a little bit older, 56% over 45 rather than 50. It's a little bit less diverse. So it's 80% European versus 76, 6% Pacifica rather than 8, and so on. And only 9% disability rather than 13. And then if we look at the potential market, this is a lot older. So this is 26% aged over 65 versus 18. It's slightly more female, and these are less likely to be people with children in the household. But what's interesting about that is, if this is the potential market, how do we create either events or communications about our events that would be more likely to appeal to an older female adult market? Because we're doing really well appealing to a younger, diverse family market, particularly with people with disabilities. How are we going to do the opposite? If you want to grow the market, why aren't these people biting? Is it we've got the wrong kind of event, not enough events, or the way we're communicating about the events isn't working? Where are they? So, not surprisingly, the current market, guess where they are? They're in Auckland and Wellington. They're not only where the Asian audience is concentrated, but it's also where people are concentrated in New Zealand. So in the major population centres, that's where you'll find the biggest current market. It's also probably where you'll find the most provision of Asian arts. So opportunity and motive to go. If you look at the lapsed audiences, again, pretty evenly distributed like everything else. We cannot explain why it's higher in Hawke's Bay. Answers on a postcard. If you live in Hawke's Bay, that would be useful to know. But for some reason, Hawke's Bay outperforms the rest of New Zealand and this is a weird thing to outperform on. Outperforms New Zealand in, I used to go to this, but I don't anymore. So is it that we don't have enough Asian arts provision in Hawke's Bay? You tell me. But there is a pocket of potential there. And then the potential audiences are interesting, still concentrated in the population areas, but far more spread out across the country. So again, that suggests the potential audiences is to do with provision. Where is Asian arts? Where do you get access to them? So what's interesting when we think about that is, go back to this idea as festivals as a gateway. We look at the current market for Asian arts. What is it that these people are going to? Remember, there were 1.9 million people say they'd been. Well, 1.3 million of that 1.9 say that it was a festival that they went to. Festivals are the common denominator, but they're also the gateway into Asian arts. One of the reasons they're a gateway is because festivals reduce the risk. You don't have to commit to a single art form or buy a single ticket to a single venue on a particular day. You can turn up at a festival and encounter things or dabble in things. You can try without try before you buy almost. So it's a way of encountering and learning about whether you like things without having to overcommit to it. Film, you can see, is popular. Film's always popular. But Asian film gets 1 million. And then we get down into art exhibition, digital and object art and so on. Music right down at the bottom, but it's still 487,000, still 12%. But festivals are really, really powerful here as a gateway. If you look, though, we have a problem, which is this. This slightly lighter bar that I've just added are the people we used to have. So there's another 750,000 people in this market, and 700,000 of them went to a festival and haven't been back. There's another 380,000 have been to an exhibition and not been back. So, and there's another 300,000 been to a music event and not been back. So there's a lot of people that have slipped through our fingers here. And then I think you might have to lose me, maybe, but I don't know, maybe not. These are the potential people. So there's another 23% in the potential, but there's 1.2 million say, oh, I wouldn't mind trying a festival. But look, 1.3, 1.6, 1.7, 1.5. This is a big load of people saying, let me try this stuff. So I think we have two issues here. One might be about the provision of this, of Asian arts. A second thing might be about the way that we market and communicate about these things, because we know that people need a lot of reassurance to know that they are going to like it. Maybe they need enough video preview to test it and go, oh yeah, that does look good. But I'd like to focus finally on one thing, which is this idea of retaining the audiences we've had. I think that what's unfortunate, festivals are wonderful, but festivals are not always great at capturing people's contact details. They are often, people can wander in and wander around and wander out. We don't know who they are. We hope they come back next time, but we know that we know that 700,000 people haven't. So although they may be a gateway to engage for the first time or to try out or to sample Asian arts, we know they're not very good places to capture audience data. So they're fantastic, but maybe we could look at ways in which, through ticketing or through other activity on site, we may be able to potentially capture more of the festival going audience onto our databases and mailing lists. We also think something else is happening. We think there's a lot of other Asian arts all around the country, Asian exhibitions and theatre shows and whatever. And we think that there will be people who are attending these Asian arts who are on other people's mailing lists, organizations' mailing lists. But those organizations may not consistently do Asian arts events, so they do occasional Asian arts events. And if that's the case, then the people who tried an Asian art event are not probably going to hear about a lot more Asian arts events by being on that mailing list, because there aren't many. But they don't hear about the other Asian arts events that are on in the city or locally, because they're being promoted by a different venue with a different mailing list. And so we think that this 2.6 million people who have been to Asian arts events, 1.9 recently, many of them may well be captured on somebody's mailing list. But those mailing lists are all fragmented. And if you've got an Asian arts event, or you've got a season of Asian arts events, if you want to tell all of the people that have been to Asian arts events before, you're going to struggle, because there are no really good lists. There's a pocket here and a pocket there and a pocket there. And so the two things I'd like to end by recommending is, can we really seriously think about building in more mechanisms to capture audience data, so that we have bigger, more accessible mailing lists, so that we can tell more people and persuade more people to come back to more Asian arts events? And maybe, can we form a network of collaboration between all of the disparate venues that stage occasional Asian arts events, and get them to cooperate and collaborate with each other, so that when one venue has an Asian arts event, all the other venues that have got pockets of Asian arts audiences on their lists tell their audiences about it. So that's what I'm going to do. More collaboration, more cooperation. In summary, I suppose what I'm saying is, the Asian arts market's big and growing, and it's really active. The market for Asian arts is enormous, but it's disparate and fragmented. We have poor data capture. If we really want to accelerate the growth of Asian arts in New Zealand, we not only have to do more of it and get it out to more places, but we need to capture the data for audiences. Otherwise, it's going to be hugely inefficient. We fish people out of the sea, give them one experience, then throw them back into the sea, and we don't know who they are. So if we really want to be serious about growing the audience, let's collaborate to make that happen. That's it. That's me.
Thanks so much, Andrew. And what a great whittle, or great challenge for our sector to end on. So some of the things that I'm reflecting on as you're speaking there, we've had some really great questions come through from people at home. We've had questions like, how can we better support Asian artists who are new to New Zealand, and noting all the different communities that are coming to New Zealand as well in more recent times. So these are some of the things we'll think about as well. Forums like this help us expand our research and consider how to best support the arts in New Zealand more broadly. Something I've been reflecting on is just the shared diversity and breadth of identities and communities within what we call Asian. There are so many different ethnic groups and cultures within that category, and multiple different generations of Asian peoples that now exist in New Zealand, each one bringing unique and different perspectives. So we do have to be mindful of that as well. It's not a homogenous group. Like you said, it's just this incredible, rich, diverse community, which we need to learn a lot more of. As you said, there's not a great track record for our Asian communities. We don't have great data about our audiences, our artists, and we know representation is low. What we do have is fragmented. So how do we better work together? How do we build those tools to better capture data? And without them, as you say, we can't really accelerate the growth of Asian arts or Asian audiences without those tools. Before we finish up today, Andrew, is there one last takeaway you'd like to share with our audiences from this research?
I think it's that idea of Asian art needs to be more visible. I think that everyone will have seen that there are some very successful festivals and be aware maybe of some exhibitions and other things. But I think it goes under the radar a little bit. I mean, did we know that there were 577,000 people, people identified as Asian in the market? Did we know that they're as active as the rest of the population in arts and culture? Did we know that in 5 art forms, they seriously outperform the rest of the population in how active they are in some art forms? Did we know that they need a lot more information and explanation and reassurance? Did we know that they need a lot more information about logistics and travel and transport and disability access? Did we know that before? Now we do. Did we know about the thing about group sizes and whether we could help support that? And then finally, I think is everyone will see this as being a minority thing. It's a bit of a niche, isn't it? A venue that has occasional Asian arts things on, not consistently, one here, and so it's a minority strand of programming. But you put all of that together, there are 1.9 million New Zealanders have engaged with it recently, and another 750,000 who have, but not recently. Most other art forms that are seen to be big, not niche art forms, I mean, even theatre, for example, would kill for those numbers. Kill for those numbers. Yeah. So I hope what this research has done is by bringing all of this out of the shadows, adding it all together, you get this enormous number. The market for Asian arts is enormous, and the Asian audience itself is active and growing. We can't ignore it. This is an enormous opportunity for us, but my fear is that we don't have the infrastructure for that. And the answer isn't just doing more Asian arts. We do that, but we need to consolidate the audience I can bring the whole thing down to something as mundane as capturing data onto a database so we can do, or sharing, collaborating with each other. But if we don't tell these people what's on, they are far less likely to go than if we do. So I think this is kind of a moment for me, and Creative New Zealand have to be congratulated that by focusing on Asian arts, that they've really revealed how important, how big, how growing, how much potential there is. And I think people will be surprised when they see the size of the market. And I'll tell you what, if I was an Asian arts practitioner, I'd be really pleased. I'd be going for this market big time. But I'll tell you what, if I was a a general venue, I'd now be thinking there's a much bigger audience, untapped audience for Asian arts than we thought there was. So maybe instead of doing occasional Asian arts things, maybe we should do regular Asian arts things to serve this huge audience that we maybe didn't know existed. So I think if that's what comes out of this study, we should be pleased.
There's such amazing untapped potential there, Andrew. Thank you so much. And it really just goes to show, like, if we can illustrate it with the data and we have the data to show it, the data's there. Who's going to disagree with the numbers if the numbers are so big in the first place? It's not like we weren't here. It's just that you can't see us. So thank you so much for your time today, Andrew. Some really great insights and a really wonderful wero to finish up on and reflect back on everything that we've learned today. Thank you for your time. We hope you've found this Q&A insight helpful as well, as we've worked through all these findings this morning. And again, if you'd like to review the research in more detail in your own time, you'll find all the full and summary reports of the 2020 edition of our research on the Creative New Zealand website. Thank you again for all your questions as well. We've loved hearing from you, and we've done our best to reply to most of them this morning. If we haven't managed to reply you yet, we'll definitely follow up with you. You can also reach us at research@creativenz.govt. We've popped that email address in the chat boxes for you. And finally, we'd love your feedback on this event as well, so we can continue delivering relevant and useful events. We have a short 5-minute survey. The link is popping up in the chat boxes now. Please let us know what you think and how we can improve. Again, to Andrew and the MHM team, Joe and Lydia, thank you for your collaboration on Audience Atlas. It's always a real privilege, Andrew, to hear your deep insights, and thank you for sharing your mātauranga with us at this hour. We hope you have a restful rest of your evening in Munich. Thank you to Auckland Live for beaming us onto your screens today, and to Platform Interpreting for signing for us. A big thank you to my colleagues at Creative New Zealand, the Audience Atlas team, Helen, Aroha, Richard, James, Lucy, Chaz and Esther, without whom this research and Q&A series would not exist, and who have been busy in the background answering all your questions this morning. So thank you so much. And a special shout out to James today. Thank you for being here. Finally, thank you all for joining us today. 多謝晒大家今日嚟參加呢個研討會。Ka nui te mihi kia koutou katoa. To end, I'll close our time today with a karakia. Me noi tātou. Whakaria ake te kite kōrero ki te pau tuarongo. Hei tiki anō mō muri ake nei. Kia wātia ai, kia wātia ai. Kia tīna, haumie, huie, tā ki e. Hang the basket of knowledge upon the back post of the whare, so that it may be collected again hereafter. Clear the space, clear the space. Know and understand, join together, come together, be united as one. So that's it for today's Q&A webinar focused on Asian New Zealand audiences and the market for Asian New Zealand arts in Aotearoa. And it's a wrap, finally, for Audience Atlas Aotearoa 2020 edition. Thanks again for joining us. Have a great Tuesday ahead. Ka kite anō. Joy again.